Hello and welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 86, brought to you by Wicked Tree Gear. Today, John and I are talking rut plans and doing a little Q&A to answer a few listener questions. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. It is here, the Super Bowl of deer hunting. The rut is upon us. Super pumped for that. Actually, just took a little break from packing for my rutcation to start editing this podcast and get it out this week, since I'm going to be doing some traveling. So by the time you are listening to this, I will be in a tree stand in Pennsylvania still. At this point, I'll be at the new property, at my dad's property, doing my first rut hunt there. So I'll actually arrive there on Monday night, and then we'll hunt all day Tuesday, all day Wednesday, all day Thursday, and then we'll be hunting probably the Friday morning, which I believe is the 2nd, and we'll be hopping in my truck at that point in the afternoon after a morning hunt and driving to Ohio to meet up with my buddy Chad from Exodus Outdoor Gear, and be doing, I think it's 9 days in Ohio. So really looking forward to that. Unfortunately, I think next week while I'm at my dad's place, and unfortunately, well, two unfortunately, I guess. Unfortunately, number one is I don't think my dad's actually going to be able to make it up to hunt together, which is kind of a bummer. But hopefully I can still put him on something, maybe in late season, or he may come up and actually hunt the week that I'm actually in Ohio. So that's bummer number one. Bummer number two is I was looking at the forecast, and it looks like Tuesday is going to be really good. Probably the best day that I have while I'm there. And then Wednesday, the temperatures are going to go up. I saw it's supposed to be like 70 on Wednesday, which is just ridiculous. And then Thursday, it's supposed to get a little cooler, but, a little bit of rain, I think. And then Friday, it looks like it's going to be a pretty decent day. But, of course, I'm packing up and getting ready to get out of there. And then Ohio's forecast doesn't look too bad at this point. It looks like there's a little bit of rain, but it seems like we're going to get there on the backside of the rain, which could be really good. It seems like right now a little high pressure is going to roll in, which would be nice. The temps aren't super cold. It'll be high mid 30s at night is what it kind of looks like right now, and then low 50s during the day is what it kind of seems like. So overall, it looks like so far the forecast doesn't look to be too bad once we get to Ohio. But I won't belabor this up front. We'll just kind of jump into things. So today we're doing something a little bit different than John and I have done in the past. I guess let me figure out how to say this. So, being on social media and so forth, I get a chance, through the podcast to talk to a lot of people and have a lot of really great conversations. I ask questions to plenty of people, and folks are, interested in reach out at time to time to see if I could possibly answer a question for them, related to a ton of different topics. Sometimes it's not even hunting related, but today I thought what would be really cool is to kind of take some of those questions that have been kind of accumulating, and kind of take some time and go through a handful of those and have John and I answer those. This is the first time we're doing a Q&A. I got to say, obviously, we recorded the Q&A in advance of me recording this up front, so it was a lot of fun. I think we'll probably do it more often. It's kind of interesting to see how the two of us would answer the questions, slightly different rather. So it was a lot of fun, and look forward to doing those more often. If you have a question, don't be shy. Go ahead and hit me up on Instagram or Facebook and drop me a line and let me know what question you have. We'll try to fit it in at some point, because we were going to try to do the Q&A thing and answer some listener questions from time to time, because it was a lot of fun, and hopefully we are able to answer them appropriately and help some folks out and not necessarily damage any of their upcoming hunts with bad advice or bad information. One other thing, a little bit of housekeeping here to mention before I wrap this piece up, is that I will be putting out a podcast a day is my goal while I'm on rutcation. So you'll likely see and hear a lot from Chad and I. to kind of keep tabs on that. We'll probably do some Instagram live stuff as well. So make sure you're tuned into Instagram. Turn on your notification if you want to be notified when we go live and so forth. We'll be doing a daily update just to kind of what was happening in the timber, what we were seeing, what type of deer movement we were seeing, anything that we had seen from the stand, any encounters, just kind of giving you a day-by-day update. And then we'll, of course, have a podcast that's associated with that as well. So fingers crossed I'll actually be able to do it every single day. I'm debating whether or not I'll do the podcast, the day updates, while I'm at my dad's property, since I will be solo. That would be just me talking into a microphone. But if anything interesting happens, I'll likely do one. But if it's just the normal, stand time without much action, I might not. But the Ohio one will definitely happen. So be on the lookout for that. And before we get this thing kicked off, let's go ahead and talk about our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. First and foremost, we are brought to you by Wicked Tree Gear, the longest, lastest, fastest cutting, toughest tree trimming equipment you have ever used. Simply put, the toughest saws on earth. How tough are they? Tough enough to come with a lifetime warranty. And right now, when you visit wickedtreegear.com, use the promo code TRUTH at checkout and get a 20% discount on your Wicked purchase. We're also brought to you by Exodus Outdoor Gear. The new Exodus Trek is a byproduct of all the consumer voices who have been excited about what Exodus trail cameras have to offer, but just can't fit a $200 camera in their budget, and that's okay. A budget-friendly camera backed by the industry's leading warranty is now here. The Trek comes in at $145. It has the same proprietary shell design as the Lift Series camera, same 5-year warranty and unmatched customer service policies, 0.7 second trigger speed, photo, video, time-lapse, and hybrid modes, all with a simple single-line backlit LED display. You also get about 20,000 images on one set of lithium batteries. If you'd like to learn more about Exodus trail cameras, check them out at ExodusOutdoorGear.com. If you dig what you see, save yourself $20 and use the promo code TRUTH at checkout. We're also brought to you by Glacier Coolers, simply the world's finest. Whether you're hunting, camping, or fishing, you'll enjoy smarter design, stronger construction, and superior insulation of Glacier Coolers. Visit them at glaciercoolers.com. I'll be using my coolers, of course, on this trip because I actually cook all my food in advance of the trip, and I freeze it, so I eat a lot of chilies, a lot of soups, and things of that nature that I can easily transport. I take a crock pot, I throw all those frozen soups in gallon bags, toss them in my Glacier Cooler on the way, and then I'm on my way to rut camp, and then every evening I let one out to thaw, throw it in the crock pot, and it is ready to rock and roll whenever I get home. So go ahead and check out Glacier Coolers. If you dig what you see, use the promo code TRUTH at checkout and save yourself 20%. Now let's go ahead and get this rut plan party started. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today we have in store for you one fine and dandy John and Clint catch-up session and new listener Q&A. What's going on, John?
I'm so excited for this Q&A session, dude. Awesome.
I know. It's I have a hard time believing anyone wants to ask us anything.
Well, a Q&A session proves that people actually do listen to the podcast.
There you go. Exactly. Well, and actually, there weren't any, the question being, could you guys just shut up and stop? So that was a positive. There were none of those.
That's positive.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can find those on some iTunes ratings if you're interested. You could read a couple of those on the iTunes ratings. But no, today John and I are going to just do a little bit of a catch up on what we've had going on this so far this season since the last time we've had a chance to chat, and then we figured, we've never done this before on the show. We thought we'd answer a couple questions. We always get pinged on, whether it's on social media or an email or whatever, or a direct message, and folks ask some questions about things that we've heard or guests that we've had on or additional information about a topic that we covered, and always happy to help out when we do get questions, but just thought this would be a nice way to kind of aggregate them because people out there might have similar questions, so we can probably kind of cover off for a bunch of folks in one fell swoop, and it would be kind of fun because as I kind of read through the questions, I guess I had a little bit of I guess I'm cheating a little bit. I had the answers to the test to a degree because I saw all the questions before you, John. So you're going to be kind of coming in cold, man. Are you having the cold sweats like the night before a test?
Yeah, yeah. This is like pop quiz, pop quiz.
Yeah, exactly. Only you can't fail. You can't fail this one. You're always a winner, John.
That's always cool.
Yeah. Nice. But before we jump into
I just have my pride and dignity to worry about.
Yeah, well, in my book, there's not. I still don't have much to worry about in that case because you get married.
I'm over 40. I don't care.
Yeah, I'm married and over 40 with children. It's like those things have long been gone. It's I haven't seen those since like 30.
Right, there you go.
But I figured before we jump into the questions, man, we'll do a little catch up on the season. So I know today when we were talking earlier in the week, you had mentioned you weren't going to go out Thursday, and I was like, oh, cool. I was like, well, let's do a podcast that day. And then I text you today. I'm like, hey, so what time you want to roll? And you're like, I did go hunt, and you were out doing some freelance. And so how was the freelance?
Wasn't bad. Getting to see some new properties. It's always interesting to me, like, even just putting eyeballs on different properties and see the way other people are hunting. Tonight I had the opportunity to go hunt with a local that's been hunting the same property, since he was a teenager. So it was interesting to kind of, to jump on there with him, and he's like, no, dude, bring your bow. And I'm like, what? So, anyways, we both brought a bow, and we were going to go do a hang and hunt. And the cool thing was he hasn't been on this property in this area all season long. The bad problem is the honeysuckle had grown up so much that just wasn't going to work. We didn't have time to do all of our trimming and stuff like that. So I told him, I said, hey man, instead of us being here making a whole bunch of racket, let's save it for another day. And let's just go jump in that blind. So he had an old grain wagon with a homemade blind built on top of it. Super cool, very nostalgic. I can now say that I've hunted out of a grain bin, grain wagon, but
right.
It was neat. It's a cool spot, and like he has in years past, he will have an encounter with a giant. I have no doubts.
Yeah. This guy drops hammers with the with on the regular, I guess you could say, which is good for him, man. I can't say the same for me necessarily, but hey, anyone out there who can, I'm all for it. It's like my buddy Rick from New York. I sent you that picture of that deer he tagged that opening morning in New York, and I just saw another picture because he has 2 tags in New York, and he just dropped another one as of today. So
oh wow,
yeah, so that guy always seems to get into the hammers. So it's like I'm always slightly envious of those folks, but I'm like, man, if you got it, dude, if you got the stick, swing it. You know what I mean? I haven't been able to find the stick, shall we say. That's been the tale of my season, actually, man. It's like, I know you and I've chatted, via text and a little bit, on the podcast and stuff, but I have some decent deer that I'm after. It seems like I'm 1 day to 2 days behind them religiously. Like, and I can't seem to figure them out because I've been, hunting these swamp bucks, and they've been kind of giving me fits a little bit because I've been checking out the trail camera data, and then I've had the one encounter, with the one shooter live, and I've been watching, what winds they want to move on and stuff like that. And I was actually talking to my buddy Greg Litzinger about it because he hunts a lot of swamps and he hunts a lot of beds, and I was pretty certain that I was in on these guys, bedroom, and I was texting him one day because I was like, man, I can't figure these guys out. I was like, because the one deer all of a sudden, like I had him on like a northeast wind, that was whenever he was wanting to move during daylight. I was like, and then all of a sudden, like 2 weeks later or whatever, I was like, I have him on like a southwest wind using the same bedding area. I was like, it's just any wind. I was like, he's in that area and he's there during daylight. And I was like, in this one particularly, I was like, he's showing up between like, he's there around like noon, 3:30, like early, you know what I mean? So, and then this new deer shows up, and he's kind of a morning guy, and he's passing through in the morning, and he's also doing the same thing where he's using just about any wind direction. Like, it's not like there's a rhyme or a reason to like the wind that he's using to move. And I was trying to figure out what the deal was, and he said to me, like, it's been his experience is what he said, that he's like, whenever you get in close to bedding like that, he was like, if they're willing to move on any wind, he's like, to me, he's like, that kind of says that you're all up in their business, in their wheelhouse, and they're so comfortable in that bedding area that they're willing to move on any wind. So
Sure, that makes sense.
yeah, so it's like I didn't think about it until he said it. I was like, you know what, that's probably what it is, and which makes it incredibly hard to figure out when to go hunt them. You know what I mean? Because there's not necessarily the right wind day for them. Now there's the wind day that I have to watch for just to make sure that the wind isn't going to necessarily blow into the bedding and blow it out, which means the only wind I really can't hunt is really like a straight west wind is the only thing I can't hunt. Everything else will work, in that particular spot for the most part. But so that's been my story in there, man. I'm going to put on one more hunt, on the last Saturday of October. I guess that's the 26th. Is that what it is? 26th or 27th? I can't remember what the date is, but that'll be probably my last trip in to hunt those guys until I leave for Ohio. And then if I don't get anything in PA before that, then I'll probably take another crack at them in second season. But that's been what's going on here, man. Tagged a doe and got some freezer meat, and otherwise looking forward to the rut and getting ready to make my trip to Ohio to try to get to try to put a buckeye on the ground.
There you go. Yeah. I like the sounds of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. This year it's been scout more than you hunt, right? And I've made a few stabs. I've made a big play into the public ground. I sat that 2 or 3 days straight, hunted that pretty hard. I had a 135, 140, 10-pointer come in. Good friend of mine, Chancey Walters, with the company Big Buck Ruiner. He came down and we were doing a photo shoot for Glacier Coolers, actually. And
nice.
Midday, we got the shoot done, and he's like, "Hey, let's go jump in a stand." So we went and jumped in a stand in public, and that was on the tail end of my, my 3 or 4 day, blast in their blitz. We'll call it a blitz session.
Right.
We had a nice buck, and it's a buck I've got on trail camera, but it looks like a 3-year-old, and I kind of went through the motions, the arm movements, like I was, drawing my bow, and I stopped him, in a shooting lane, and, just, you can never get enough practice, right?
Yeah.
So, he trotted off, and cool video encounter, and if he makes it, he'll be a stud next year. He's a good, good looking deer now.
Right.
I'm not,
there's
degrading him because of his 3-year-old status, but, in public land, that's a phenomenal buck. But I've been fortunate to get some pictures of some bigger, mature deer in there. So, I was willing to let him go and let him pass. But I called a buddy of mine, and he's like, "Dude, you let that go in public?" He's like, "Whenever you go into public land, you get a 1 year and 10-inch handicap right off the bat before you even get out of the truck." So,
that's awesome.
But I hope I don't regret, letting that deer. I already know I'm not going to regret letting that deer go. I had a cool encounter, and it was fun, so that's good. But on some of my other properties, I've really been laying off them completely. I planted those with that Wicked Greens, and I really set those properties up for cold weather and late season, is what I was going for. And as we're doing this podcast right now, I'm actually going through SD cards. One of my shooters on the 23rd. So today's Thursday, Tuesday morning, I woke up and I looked outside, and I'm like kicking myself. I'm like, why didn't I go hunt this morning? Why didn't I? Now, I don't know what stand I would have gone to. I might not have gone to the right stand. But if I would have gone to one stand in particular, he would have walked through in daylight that morning, underneath my nose.
Nice. Is this the one that you got pictures of this summer?
No.
When you're blasting? No.
It's not that one. That one has completely up and vanished.
Really?
He's just Gandhi, man. Like, he shed velvet and just disappeared. So obviously I don't have his fall range. I had his summer range, and at some point in his loop, and that's about it. But this is a buck that actually showed up about a month ago, hard-horned, and he's got forked G3s on both sides.
Oh, that's cool.
Just a cool deer. Looks like he's 4. It's probably going to be in like the mid 50s range, something like that. But he's a super awesome deer, and I'd be happy to put a tag around him,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
He is starting to show up more and more regular. So, one of my tactics, we get into the season and I start moving all my cameras off of whether it be a mineral site or a feed site where I was getting inventory, and I start moving them to scrapes and stuff. So I've got all my cameras now moved over to scrapes or scrape trails. You know what I mean?
Right. Yep.
In between 2 scrapes. And I've got him on 3 cameras now in a straight line.
Interesting. So what are you thinking, man? Like, is his pattern pretty solid, do you think, or
it's getting more and more consistent. That's the funny part is, it went from having one picture of him a month ago to then having a picture of him 2 weeks, and then a week and a half ago, and then a week ago. And now it's like 5 pictures in the last 7 days.
Interesting. Is there doe bedding near there? Is it like, is he making that round?
There's bedding. Yeah, there's bedding all around on both sides. And so the one property, it's 120 acres, and I have 2 tree stands on the property, and those 2 tree stands are probably 300 yards apart. So, I mean, realistically, it's like I'm only really hunting 5 acres.
Yeah.
7 acres of this property.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to leave everything else alone. Now, I might be abandoning. There's probably people listening going, "Oh, you're an idiot," Look at all the rest of that property that you're forgetting. But that's what I'm trying to do. I'm really kind of honing in on this straight line so there's a piece of timber. There's I guess you can call it a finger. It's about 80 yards wide, you know, but it is the most narrow point for him to cross in the open. So I've got one tree stand in that timber finger, and then I have a tree stand on my food plot.
Okay.
And it's Scrape City, all in between there.
Nice. Yeah.
So I think what he's doing is, I think that's part of his loop. Instead of going out in the open across this big open fescue field, if he went to the north, he'd have to cross 400 yards of open fescue. But if he crosses between these 2 points of timber, then he's only exposed for about 100 yards.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know. That's that. So kind of starting to key in on that deer. I've actually got a new buck that's showing up on my personal property on my food plot, but he's really, really nocturnal. He's like 2 a.m. nocturnal.
Right. He's coming home from the bar
so
drunk
we'll
nocturnal.
See if he gets into daylight any at all.
Right.
And maybe he's killable. But, then like I said, the public, that's my options. But, man, I tell you, you try to get more and more ground, and then if you're not careful, you can get too spread out.
Yeah.
And, you spend 2 or 3 days on this property when you check your trail cameras on property B, and you're like, damn,
Right.
I could have, I had daylight walkers and I just missed it. So, but then, flip the coin, and if you spend all your time on one property, you smoke it out, right? So, damned if you do, damned if you don't,
Yeah. But I mean, the one thing is, man, you laid a plan earlier this year when we started talking about, I forget what episode it was, but we were talking about our goals and, tactics and what our approach was going to be for this year and how it was going to be different from, last year or years past in general. And the one thing you had mentioned is that you were going to, be choosy early in the season, and that you were doing something different and setting your properties up for much later in the season, as opposed to, October into November. It was more of a, early November into late season play was kind of what your strategy was. And, kudos to you, because you have held fast on it. I'm not as disciplined. I'd have a hard time not diving in. And I'm sure it kills you some days. It's just talking about that deer that passed that camera. You're like, damn it, I should have got up and hunted that. But you're playing your plan. You know what I mean? So, So that's good. You know, it's interesting that that deer kind of makes a loop, because it's funny because like this time of year, right? It's like they should become less and less patternable as you get closer and closer to the rut, except for maybe the exception of like, you know, a scrape line that they're going to work. But it's like scrapes will turn on and then go cold just as quickly as they'll turn on. You know what I mean? It's like you'll go in 1 week and like there's nothing. You go in the next week, you know, the woods blow up for two weeks where it's just like sign everywhere. Then all of a sudden it goes cold again. Like a certain scrape line will go cold. You know, it's like, so it's interesting that you have him on some type of like scrape pattern. I'm interested. Did when you're seeing him, was it after a rain possibly?
One picture was right after a rain, freshening up a scrape in daylight, and then showed up in my food plot on those scrapes on that cold, frosty morning. We had a real good frost Tuesday morning, and I mean, you have no idea. I mean, all day long, I was sitting there buried in front of my computer with like real job work.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, you should have said, stick it to the man today. Like, you really should have just gone and got a tree and hunted this morning instead of doing your job.
Dude, that was exactly how I felt this morning, because this morning was at least on this side of the state, it may have happened a day or two earlier on the western part of the state, but on this side of the state this morning was the first frost. Like, I walked outside this morning at like 6 a.m. to take the dog out. The yard had frost on it, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. I was like, and I was working from home today, so it was like the opportunity to slip out was there. But I just have a bunch of work to do before I take my vacation to go hunt for a couple weeks. So there was no getting out, but it was killing me too, man. I was sitting there the entire time just thinking, I was like, you know what? I bet you every single big deer I have on camera in that stinking piece of public land is probably walking right by where I would hunt their bedding. Guarantee it.
Yeah.
I'll hunt it Saturday and I will pull the camera card and I will look, and I promise you there's going to be 2 shooters in daylight at that spot. So what are you going to do though, man? You can't be everywhere all the time, and someone's got to pay the bills.
Yeah. Somebody's got to keep the lights on.
Yeah, I didn't hit the Mega Million for anyone out there who was wondering. I didn't
either.
Yeah. I did play, and I had already planned out exactly what I was going to do. Which was probably why I didn't win. But you know, nonetheless, it was fun to dream for like a day, you know, about what I would do with, you know, 1.6 billion.
Well, there was a thing on the news. They were talking about the release of endorphins. Like when you're standing there at the cash register and you know, they're like, yeah, what do you need? And you're like, oh, give me, you know, 5 Mega Million tickets, you know, and as the machine's like printing out that ticket, they talk about this release of endorphins where people just for like 5 seconds, you know, it might even be like orgasmic or something, you know, but you're just like, for that split second, you're thinking, oh my God, what if this is the winning ticket? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you get to like live out a little fantasy for like, you know, 5 seconds while you're standing there in the gas station.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting so high now. It's like, I mean, the last I looked, it was like 1.6 billion. It's like people are going to be turning tricks on the corner to buy more tickets here in the
there was a winner in South Carolina.
Oh, there was.
Yeah,
I didn't know
there
that.
was one winner, and I don't know if they've claimed or not, but there was a winning ticket sold in South Carolina. Now, there was a ton of the $1 million winners.
Okay.
I guess it's like 5 numbers, but they didn't get the Powerball or something like that, or 6.
Right.
I don't know what it was, but yeah, there was one winning ticket in South Carolina.
Wow.
So they didn't claim right away, which I can tell you right now, if I won, first thing I'm doing is changing my name.
Yep.
All of my immediate family is getting like burner phones.
Yep.
And they'll get a cash prize for them to take a sledgehammer to their old phone.
Yeah.
But I'm changing my name, and you know, I'm not going to say it's a curse because it'd be awesome. But dude, you'd have to just bury yourself underground. Think about every person that doesn't like you.
Yep.
They're coming after you now.
Well, it's funny.
Every ex-girlfriend is coming after you now.
Yeah,
you know?
I was thinking about it actually when I was driving home. Now, this is not deer related at all, but it's fun to talk about these things. I was actually thinking about it whenever I was coming to work or coming home from work the one day, because I was like, you know, what would you actually do? Because you always hear about the curse, and you know, it makes some people's lives more difficult. You know what I mean? It's like, I always say, it's like, yeah, I'd love to have that kind of problem, but
wine problems.
Right. But it really does come with some challenges. Cause I was like, if I were to win tomorrow, I was like, you couldn't tell anyone at first. It's like, you of course have to get like, a good accountant and an attorney and figure out what you're going to do with all the money before you actually get it. That way you have a plan and this, that, the other. And it's just not like sitting around. I was like, I couldn't live where I live. You know what I mean? I was like, you have to, then you have so much dough at that point, you become a target, so you have to get the house with like the gate and the whatever to try to keep people from, crazy people from doing bad shit, essentially. You know what I mean? It's like you have to all of a sudden like switch on and be alert, because you have a lot to lose, I guess, and not necessarily the money, but just, because of how, some people might act toward you or want things they might want to do to you because of it. I'm like, man, how bad would that suck? It's like, I don't want to sell my house. It's like, I'd rather just like have all the money, just continue to live where I live. You know what I mean? But
yeah, no, you're exactly right. I mean, in my past life, law enforcement, any person that I ever put in jail or put in prison in my life, they're coming after me. Like, they're suing me from their jail cell.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like I said, you'd have to change your name and just go off the grid. And,
yep.
And I mean, I would do everything in my power to not tell anybody.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. That would be my game plan. It would be, I think I'd follow the same path, man. Name change, first get, all the legal stuff in order, name change, and then, basically disappear to wherever, you know what I mean? And tell, of course, very close family and, loved ones and so on and so forth. But that would be, you all of a sudden have to get a very, very small circle of people, and that's it.
Oh, man. Well, and, it's funny too, because I remember when I was younger, my dad would always tell me, he said, you got a lot of friends right now, right? I'm like, yeah, especially like you're in high school, whatever. But he's like, well, when you get to be my age, like if you can count how many close friends you've got on one hand, like you're doing good, or, that's normal. But like if you could fill up your hand, then, that's amazing,
Right.
And I totally get what he's talking about, totally understand it.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's just one of those things where you sometimes you have a falling out with someone, or you just don't agree with them any longer about certain things or whatever. And then other ones, it's just like distance and time happens where it's like, I like that guy, but we don't ever see each other anymore, and we don't really have much in common any longer. So it's like, yeah. But that's about right, man. It's like one-ish, two-ish hands. Just it's quality over quantity these days.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Speaking of quality, let's. I think we should
quality Q&A.
Yeah, let's do some quality Q&A and see if we have any quality answers here. So the way we'll do this is, some folks did give me their name, so I'll give them some love, and mention their name so they can get credit for the
super cool
for the question. And we'll just kind of go through these. I'll read them, and then we'll decide who's going to respond first. So I'll let you take this one. You can take the first answer to this.
Okay.
So this fella here writes in and says, would like to hear your you guys' opinion on the pros and cons of growing up hunting and being taught versus learning to hunt later in life, being self-directed or self-taught, from a learning standpoint, and maybe the reasons why, learning to hunt doesn't have a structure or certificates, and that you're not really taught how to hunt specific game animals and stuff like that. So I'll let you go ahead and take a stab at that one first.
So yeah, I mean, it's no secret. I didn't grow up hunting. I didn't buy my first deer license until I was 22 years old. So 18 years ago. I think one of the nice things for me getting into it at a later stage was maybe I was a little more financially sound, that, I could pick up a couple of items. You hear people talk about when they were younger and they were hunting, they're like, yeah, I had this old bow and, I didn't even have any camo and it was rough or whatever, but, so I think getting into it later was kind of nice, but as far as learning, I would like to think that when I was 22, I was more intelligent than I was at 10.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I could apply just general knowledge. And I think at that age, you're a little more driven about your hobbies. So, I completely immersed myself at the public library, checking out books on whitetail strategy and deer hunting books and that kind of stuff. But there is times that I definitely, even that being said, I regret not having somebody that could kind of handhold, so to speak, and really kind of teach me some of that early woodsmanship, because I would just be more knowledgeable about hunting, than I am now, which is never a bad thing. I try to learn every year. So if I could have been learning since when I was 10 versus starting to learn when I was 22, I'd be 12 years ahead, right? But at the end of the day, I mean, I'm not sad that, I got into it when I did. Right. At least I got into it, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
But yeah, there's definitely some different strategies that come into play when you're older. Now, that also being said, just the thing we were talking about earlier about work life, a lot of times work did get in the way. I was young. I was out of college. I was trying to grind. I was trying to, you know what I mean? Make something of myself financially and in my career. And so that also, came into play versus when you're a kid, let's say you don't have a job or responsibilities like that, then, it's just school and hunt, right?
Right.
So now it's work and kids and wife and hunt and work and work and work and work and work and then hunt. And, so
there's a lot of
different
work
things
in
come
there.
into play.
There was a lot of work in there.
There's just a little bit too much work in there sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah.
That'd be how I'd answer that.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, again, it's as you mentioned, it's no secret. I, grew up, which is always kind of interesting whenever you and I get together and talk about things, because we did kind of approach and come to hunting. Not only do we live in different areas with different, what I'll say, quality of hunting, we'll say, like in terms of like the caliber of deer and stuff like that, but we also, came into hunting in different ways. As you mentioned, you were, later in life you got into it, and for me, it was one of those things. As Pennsylvania is a huge, hunting heritage state, it was just kind of like a birthright. Like when I was getting ready to turn 12 years old, it was like everyone went and, I can remember whenever I was turning 12 that year, everyone in my 6th grade class, like every boy in that class was at that hunter safety course that, that summer, I guess it was, or that early fall, like everyone was. It was like none of them, every single kid in my class was at that. It was, in my school class was at that hunter safety course class, to get their license. So that was just like the thing you did. It wasn't even a question as to whether or not you were going to do it. I mean, I started going out into the timber with my dad when I was, one of my first memories is almost cutting off my own thumb with one of his knives as he was, skinning a turkey. You know what I mean? So it was just always something that I was, kind of immersed in to a degree. I think there's pros and cons to it though, which is, what they were more so asking about, and I think the pro is that, yeah, I got to enjoy a lot of it through, in my life, and spend a lot of time in the timber when I was a kid. And that was kind of like my playground to a degree. And, and got the, I was fortunate, lived in a piece of ground. We owned a little bit of ground. So, I could kind of walk out my back door once I got of age to, to be trusted with a weapon in the woods by myself. And I could just kind of go out and try to figure stuff out by myself. And which was nice, but, I think the part of the con though is that as you pass hunting heritage down, you inevitably pass down like certain myths and certain things that aren't truths about hunting too,
Sure.
And so
sure.
It takes time to kind of unravel, or decouple those things, if you're open-minded enough to do that, what I mean, to understand that the way you learned, even though that's the way you learned, necessarily isn't, true or accurate. You know what I mean? So, there's things like that get passed to you as well that you have to kind of, figure out when you get a little older, but, I think the con of it for me personally was, and this is just me, from my personal experience, was because it was just something that naturally happened, and it wasn't like I had to ask for it, or, and I'll say work for it as well, because it was just something my dad wanted to give to me and pass to me, was that you really didn't learn to appreciate it until you got a little older, because I probably didn't have an appreciation for how much hunting really meant to me. Actually, probably until I turned like 28, 29, almost 30, because, as I'd mentioned in this, podcast many times before, it's like I hunted all my life growing up until I hit probably my early 20s. And then music kind of took over and I didn't have a lot of time. And so my time was spent, chasing that passion. And so I didn't spend nearly as much time in the timber or focused on hunting. And that was really the time when I realized I had taken it for granted, like when I was growing up and all that freedom that I had to go just hunt and do whatever I wanted to do. So to me, that was kind of the con. I think there's always value in kind of the approach you took, John, in terms of like being self-directed. I think there's always a lot of, when you do something yourself, man, you've earned it and you appreciate it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And you're willing to put the work in and grind it and stuff like that. So, I think there's positives and negatives to both sides. Just like you said, it's like, I don't ever regret the way, that I was fortunate enough to be brought into hunting at an early age. I wish that maybe some of the approaches maybe would have been a little bit different, or exposed to different types of hunting earlier on, but those are just minor gripes. To cover like what they were, one part of the question asked about certifications and, why there aren't more like courses and seminars and stuff like that. I think that there are, but I just think that you have to uncover them, right? I think places like QDMA and stuff like that do a good job of putting on seminars with guys and girls who know a lot about, different facets of, hunting and different facets of different types of game that you would chase and stuff like that. I know that they do one at Cabela's here that's near me every year. The one was done by Neil Daughtry, big habitat specialist, talked about, deer habitat and their biology. They had someone from Penn State University come down that was a deer biologist and talk about all the like different research that they've been doing. There was someone from the Pennsylvania State Game Commission there. So, I mean, there are things that go on, and I agree they may not be as frequent or as robust as maybe we would like, but, there are some things out there. I think the challenge is, though, is that, every state is different and every region within states are different too, because they're all managed on a region, like game is managed on a regional level. So it's hard to have like an all-encompassing approach to like whitetail deer, because it's different in any habitat, it's different in different states. So I think that's kind of like a little bit of a challenge, but I don't know, do you have anything else to add to that one, or do you think we adequately covered that?
So like, what you were just saying, I mean, I think when it comes to the habitat management stuff, there's some really, really knowledgeable people that do a phenomenal job putting out information about stuff. You mentioned QDMA doing like the stewardship programs and stuff like that. Those are awesome. But when it comes to tactics,
yeah,
I mean, we're our own worst enemy. When I was younger, so because I didn't have anybody to teach me hunting, it was a lot of trial and error. So I'd watch a TV show, right?
Yep.
And I would see Michael Waddell, and he just snort wheezed a buck in. So for the next 5 sits in the woods, what do you think I did?
Right.
I was snort wheezing like crazy. You know what I mean? I was rattling and rattling. I'm like, well, that didn't work.
Yep.
They're such, they're wild animals. The other day I was sitting in a tree. I didn't see a single deer. I was sitting in some acorns, and I really thought I was going to see something out there. A buddy of mine was 3/4 of a mile away in a patch of acorns. And he's like, I'm covered up. He's sending me Snapchat pictures of all these deer underneath his stand. And I'm like, that's weird. We both had the same wind. We had kind of a similar setup. Our entry exit was the same. We had ag fields nearby that even had the same crop in them this year, and just totally different scenarios. So,
yeah.
I think that's where a lot of that comes from, is you can teach tactics, but we're all still chasing wild animals, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's not foolproof. I think the one place, as far as education goes, it's like, there are guys out there that do those tactical seminars and stuff like that, like the Dan Enfaltz. He'll go out and scout a piece of timber with you, and and he'll do a group thing where he takes a group of people out and walks them through swamps and shows them where he's finding bedding and how he approaches setting stands, and John Eberhart does the same thing. So there are guys out there that do that. But the other thing is too is like, it's less formal, but it's shows like this show or shows like Wired to Hunt or shows like just any number of podcasts out there, Whitetail podcasts or hunting podcasts. It's you bring on experts, or guys who are just really adept at putting deer on the ground or whatever the species is. These are the informal ways to pick up those tactics and kind of get those seminars and get those courses. You know what I mean? Because I always feel like it's like I listened to Don Higgins talk, right? I just listened to him talk about some stuff a couple weeks ago, and I picked up a few things from him just in terms of the timing of hunting, when to hunt the rut, when he likes to hunt the rut, and why. It's something I never would have thought of, but it's something I definitely want to try going forward. And I won't necessarily get into what that was specifically, but I picked up a huge tactic from him just in that moment. You know what I mean? And it was nothing more than listening to him talk in a podcast about some stuff. So I think there are resources out there. You just, I think, have to think about the resources in not such a formal way, because there's a lot of information out there. But,
yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah. Take it all in, give it a whirl, try it. I think obviously, like with anything in life, you learn more from the mistakes, know? Yeah. I think back to the first year I was in Iowa, and, I had a big buck and everything in my body said, don't do anything, but I couldn't stand it. I couldn't resist it. I had to try to force to make something happen. And I snort wheezed at a buck, and, would have been the biggest buck I've ever killed in my life. Yep. And I had him at 50 yards behind a tree, and when I snort wheezed at him, it completely freaked him out, and he went hightailing the other direction.
Yeah.
So,
lesson learned.
But I saw it on television. It worked for them, and now, I learned. I mean, I went back and I watched the video footage, and I watched his body language, and I watched the way he responded to that. He knew there wasn't another deer that close to him. Why was I trying to snort wheeze at a deer that was only 50 yards away in open timber? Yeah. Stupid mistake. But I learned from it. So if I'm ever fortunate enough to be in that position again, I know what I won't do.
Right. And that's a lot of times that's the more important piece is what shouldn't I do? It'll probably get you further than knowing what to do most times. But
yeah, so sometimes, man, you're better off just doing nothing.
Yeah, exactly. When in doubt, do nothing. That's my policy in a tree. But so I think we adequately covered that. So all right, so we'll move on to number 2, the deuce, and I guess I'll take we'll kind of rotate back and forth. I'll take the first stab at this one, cool. I guess. So shameless plug here. He says he started by saying, "Love your podcast." So I like this guy already.
This guy's an all-star.
Yeah, we're gonna send you something probably. Love the podcast. Listen to every episode. I would like to hear some information on what you would do to learn or to figure out a piece of land without the ability to feed, put out cameras, or use modern aerial imagery. And this is from Aaron Rowe. So, Aaron, when you sent this over, it made me I really had to stop and think about it because, in my lifetime, for the most part, when I was a kid, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And we didn't have game cameras or trail cameras or anything like that. I'm sure they were around, but, we didn't have any. We never really baited or anything growing up, so I didn't have these things, but I also didn't know what the hell I was doing. So it wasn't like I was assessing land necessarily. I think is where guys, like a Dan Enfeld, or like if I use like a buddy of mine, like a Greg Litzinger, or those guys, and, or guys that have a really popular YouTube channel right now that I think, would kind of fall into this outside of, when they're using Onyx maps, but the hunting public guys is sure. You just kind of have to, I think I would start with kind of figuring out what type of hunting scenario I wanted to have. Right. So I don't think it's too terribly different at the upfront of planning your hunt, because that's really what this comes down to. You got a new piece of ground. You're trying to plan your hunt. You want to figure out where you're going to go. It's like figure out what your goal is, what caliber of animal you want to kind of go after, figure out what part of a state, whatever state it is that you're in, where that's at. And then, figure out if it's public, private, whatever it is. Right. And then I think from there, if it's public, I think at that point, then, I think the first thing you should probably do is figure out who are the deer biologists or the people who are responsible for the tracts of land that you're going to be that you have access to, right? In terms of like the wildlife management, can you get a hold of someone in that capacity to kind of start to understand? Because those folks have put tons of boots on the ground in those specific, pieces of timber or those plots of ground, where they could probably point you in the right direction for access. They could probably point you in the right direction for the right type of habitat you're looking for to hunt whatever species it is that you want to hunt, right? So that's probably the first place I would start, would be there. And then after that, to me, this is where just straight woodsmanship comes up, or comes into play, where now you really, have to dive in and put boots on the ground and kind of, use what you know about the animal, whatever species it is that you're hunting, in terms of trying to track down where they're bedding, where they're living, how they're traveling, cutting tracks if you're capable of doing that and understanding, how to read those types of things. It also, I think, kind of, one thing that'll kind of impact that is what time of year are you going there to put boots on the ground. It's like, you really probably want to hit it a couple times, because you'd want to hit it probably, ideally right after rut, if you could, to understand where all the rut sign is. If you're hunting deer, you probably want to go back, during the summer, just to kind of reconfirm, what you thought you knew in terms of, the travel, I guess the trails that you would kind of see defined there I would assume would probably be more food source trails, to a degree. So you could probably start to figure out, where your main, I guess food sources would be. And then you might want to go and do some observation sits. I think I wouldn't be afraid at this point, if you lived close to it. I wouldn't be afraid, before the season even started, kind of jumping into some places that you're not going to burn up, that you're out of the way, that you're not going to be bumping deer, and just hang a stand and sit and watch a couple evenings and see what deer are doing. And then even as you get into the season, I would do that then, even still. Because you're really kind of starting at a disadvantage if you don't understand the topography. So you really have to put boots on the ground. You really have to rely on observation. So that would probably be the way that I would tackle it. I'm by no means an expert at that, but that would probably be how I would approach it. I don't know if you would do anything similar or different, John.
So one simple thing is go talk to the neighbors. Do some detectiving. Hey, you're going to be hunting some property next door. You guys been seeing any good deer? They're not going to shoot you. They're not going to eat you. The worst they can do is lie to you.
Right.
And if they're going to lie to you, they're going to say, no, I haven't been seeing anything. If they say, there's been a couple of decent bucks that have been, we've seen in this field, or we've seen crossing the road here. If they tell you that, there's a 9 times out of 10 that they're not lying to you. Yeah. I mean, people think, well, maybe they're throwing me a wild goose chase or something. Maybe, but generally speaking, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would do is shed season. I love shed hunting. And the whole time I'm shed hunting, I'm looking at trails, and those old muddy trails weren't just made,
Right.
Like those were made, they're just more obvious now. Right. Than they were during the season with leaves on. So look for old trails, look for bedding areas. If you get out there, there's snow still on the ground, you can find some beds, and you're going to find a bunch of old rubs. So in shed season, that's useless to you, but put that, you find a big rub line, a buck came through there, and I don't know how many times I see habitual rub trees. More often than not, I see habitual rub trees. So, or if there's a cluster of 5 rubs, one of those will be a habitual rub tree, and you'll see it scarred up where it's healed over, and then they've rubbed on it either in a new spot or on the backside the next year. So I like looking for those things. And like you said, boots on the ground. I'm a firm believer. This is my theory. I have nothing to substantiate this other than just memory. 20% of deer that summer in a place will stay there. Now they might come back through during the season, but they're not gonna. I just don't think bucks just don't typically summer where they fall, and so putting boots on the ground and early in the season, if that's all you got to try to learn the property and the layout, sure. as far as looking for that kind of sign, it's probably not going to be that beneficial to you later. I think the rubs and also when you're in shed season, most of the leaves have already fallen through the fall, and I find scrapes during shed season all the time. Where the dirt's still bare. So put those in your in your mind. One thought I have on rubs is once a deer kind of goes through there and rubs up that area, I don't see the bucks coming back to those spots like a whole bunch and just, every day I gotta freshen up my rub like I freshened up my scrape,
Right.
So I like scrapes better than rubs. Rubs tell me, it gives me sign, but it's not like, oh, this is hot. I like scrapes better.
Yeah, I think,
when you're doing the boots on the ground, looking for pinch points, looking for ridges, high bluffs, any high section, and just kind of be thinking about the old theory of, hunt low in the mornings and, high in the evenings.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would add to, all the stuff that we mentioned is I would consider when you plan to hunt it too. You know what I mean? Like when.
Oh, for sure.
So you kind of know what's going to be.
Yeah, depending on what state they're in when the season opens. I mean, if they can get on a buck early, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like what state are you hunting in is going to play into it. What part of the season are you going to be hunting? Because if you're going to be hunting, mid-October, I would be really focusing or really paying attention to what type of acorn drop there was going to be in that particular area. You know what I mean? Like, could you find acorn trees? You know what I mean? Like, or white oaks rather. It's like, so things like that would be, important as well. It's like, if it's early season, it's like, well, you better find the food and you better find the bedding, because those are those are your plays during that time of the year. And it's kind of the same during the late season, So I think overall too, it's like, I would definitely focus on trying to figure out where buck bedding is and where doe bedding is. Cause if you can just figure out those handful of things, you'll at least be around deer. And then from there you can kind of tighten your grip on your approach to kind of get in tighter or closer or give yourself better opportunities. But you can't kill them where they're not. So it's like, I think bedding is always one of the prime things you want to try to locate. And from that, it's just, if you don't have a map and you can't see the terrain and stuff like that, just start walking further than you think anyone else would walk. That will probably, and that will be most likely where you'll start to find deer if it's public.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And early season water, if it's, if your season comes in really, really early and there's a water source somewhere, that's not a bad place to at least check out,
Yeah. So, all right. I think we covered that one. The next one.
These are fun.
Yeah, I know. I dig these, man. We need to do this more often.
Yeah.
So the next one is from Galen Swigart. I actually know Galen. I actually met him at met him at Total Archery Challenge, and actually he won one of the giveaways a couple months ago. Super nice guy. Yeah, super nice guy. So hey, Galen, how's it going? He's asking about our layering systems. Like, so he wants to know, layering systems that we're using and how do we layer for temperatures that are, in the 30-degree range and below. And I think we're probably going to have very similar answers here, but I'll let you go first on this one. Before we continue our conversation, let's talk about Wicked Tree Gear saws. Hardcore deer hunters need hardcore tools. Do yourself a favor and check out Wicked Tree Gear, the toughest hand saws and pull saws on earth. You buy it once, you buy it for life, backed by a lifetime guarantee. Right now, if you use the promo code TRUTH, you'll save 20% on your next purchase with free ground shipping. So head over to wickedtreegear.com and get a saw that's tough enough to work as hard as you hunt.
So I am a self-proclaimed wuss when it comes to cold weather. The more I'm exposed to it, then I get a little more acclimated, as time goes on. But man, you get those like really moist, cold mornings, and it seems like it's twice as cold.
Yeah.
My general theory is, I always start out when we get into those temperatures, you can guarantee that I'm wearing core heavyweight base layer, pants, and I'm wearing, Fanatic hoodie or something as a base layer. Maybe merino wool as well underneath that, depending on how much I think I might potentially sweat.
Yeah.
If it's high winds, I'm always looking at something with wind stopper. If we're at that 30, 35 degree mark with wind and it's not super moist outside, then I'm leaning more towards Stratus, Sitka Stratus. I guess that's the other thing we got to cover. That is we're both wearing Sitka gear.
Yep.
And then when we get below 30, that's when I switch over to the Fanatic. And again, if I got a long walk in, I've got those things vented, or I might not even be wearing those at all. And, I might just have like Equinox pants over top just to cover me while I'm walking so I don't get a bunch of burrs sticking to the, to the base layers. But wind stopper is the key, man.
Yeah.
It's the key.
No doubt.
I got to wear the Celsius MIDI jacket last year, prototyping that. That thing is clutch as a nice extra layer on your core. That's not bulky. It's a nice layering piece as well. My head never really matters. Like, I'm telling you, maybe it's the beard and the extra hair or something like that, but
it's the mullet, man.
It's the mullet. It's the Kentucky waterfall.
That's right.
I don't, whether I wear a ball cap or a beanie, it's got to be real cold, for me to want to wear like the Stratus beanie. And that's as thick as I go on my head. My hands, that is clutch for me. When it gets real cold, man, I wear those incinerator flip mitts. But when it comes time to shoot, I actually take off my gloves completely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Last year it was -7 when I shot my buck with my bow and I shot it barehanded. I don't like to have anything on my hands whatsoever.
Right.
So, and there's a ton of other layering pieces that I will wear. And it's all very temperature dependent, Fanatic hoodie with a Stratus vest on top. That's very popular for me in the 30, 35 type stuff.
Yeah.
Shacket. I go to the Shacket quite a bit when we hit that 30, that 25, 30. Again, a lot of it comes to me is how far do I have to walk in? How much am I potentially going to sweat? Am I in a blind or in a tree? And what is the wind? Yeah. So it varies so much, man.
Yeah. No, it totally does, man. Because I kind of make the same call. It's also, am I sitting all day? Is this a morning, break and then hunt the evening somewhere else where I'm going to have to move? Because I can tolerate being slightly cold and uncomfortable for an hour or so. You know what I mean? But I don't want to make my whole sit like that, right? So, of course I'm wearing Sitka as well. And, I guess where I kind of start is, if it's in that 30 degree and below, at that point, it's like, it's merino, the heavy merino wool, base layers, tops and bottoms, for that. Like you, it's like, I'll switch up my mid layer a little bit, you know what I mean? Depending, how windy it's going to be and how long I'm going to be out. But a lot of times I'll go to that Fanatic hoodie as that next layer. And then, if it's in that 30 degree range, 35 degree range, and it's not like, freaky cold out and the wind isn't too bad, it's like, that's usually when I'll bust out the Fanatic vest. I love that thing. It's probably one of my favorite pieces that I wear. Super warm. And, it just seems like it warms my core to the point to where it's like, my arms don't really get cold. So long as it's not like, ripping wind.
And you can shove your arms in there up to your elbows in the front, kangaroo pouch.
Exactly. I was just going to say, so it's like, you mentioned wearing gloves. It's like, I actually kind of stopped wearing gloves because of that kangaroo pouch. Like, cause it is so warm. I just throw a hand warmer inside of that and keep my hands in there and I'm good to go. You know what I mean? So it's like, even when it's gotten cold out, I typically, if I do wear gloves, it's like, I'll wear a very light glove on my riser hand and I'll wear no glove on my release hand. That's kind of would be my MO. As far as head goes, it's like I'll wear, I'll wear, the Sitka trucker hat. A lot of times if it's windy, then I will go to the Stratus beanie. And when it's really cold, that's, absolutely what I'm wearing. It's like, just like you, I don't go any heavier than that typically gets the job done. As far as bottoms go, I'll go back and forth just depending. When it's down into the 30s and lower, I'm definitely wearing the Stratus pants. I like those, for, it not being freakishly cold. If it's going to get really windy and be in the 30s and lower, then I will go to the Fanatic bibs, the heavy hitters.
Yep.
And if it is going to be crazy cold and windy, then I will go to the Fanatic jacket and wear that as well. So that's kind of what my setup is. There is one other mid layer that I will put on. I have I'll use I guess it's the heavy mid half zip, which is just basically, I got just like a solid tone color of it. Cause I actually like to use that whenever if I do get into a blind, cause it's, keeps me kind of hidden in the blind. But I'll use that as a mid layer as well. And then there's one, my ace in the hole, I guess my secret weapon for the cold is actually a pair of base layers that I bought years ago snowboarding called Hot Chilies. And they wick away moisture like no one's business. So if it's going to get down into like the teens, the Hot Chilies come out. And those things are like
that's hilarious.
So that's my not so pro tip. It's probably one of the warmest base layers I've ever gotten. Now you don't want to have to walk very far in those things because they're warm. You know what I mean? But if you're going to be sitting for a long time and it's not too far of a walk, those things are money. And then my biggest thing is my feet, man. And I know you and I just got new boots this year because my previous boots had fallen apart, and I got a pair of lacrosse boots and 800 milligram, Thinsulate. So, and they've been super comfortable, digging those right now. But I started using a sock liner probably like 2 years ago to help with like wicking the sweat away from my feet.
Huge.
Yeah. Huge.
Yep.
And, that's been money. And then I'm going back to my old school snowboarding days. Like one of my favorite pair of socks are the socks I used to wear snowboarding because they're thin, but super warm. So a lot of times I'll wear that. And that's kind of my, get up for my layering system. It's like the earlier in the season, it's like I will use subalpine stuff for when it's warmer. I know this question was about the 30 and below, but I will use the subalpine stuff early in the season to get me to that, like, once it gets into the 40s is when I start, swapping out some of the Fanatic stuff and some of the elevated to Whitetail gear.
One thing that I will do if I have a really, really long walk in and I plan on sitting all day, I will do just any kind of sock, and when I get to my stand, then I have another pair of socks, and everybody's like, oh my God, you're taking your boots off. You're taking your sweaty sock off. Well, I have a Ziploc bag, put the sweaty socks in a Ziploc bag. Yeah, I'm releasing a little bit of scent, but if a person, and I don't recommend, it's very odd situations that I'll do this, where even a sock liner or a moisture wicking liner underneath doesn't do the trick. If you have extremely sweaty feet, and some people do that, I think there's like a medical term for that too.
Yeah.
If you have extremely sweaty feet, leave earlier so you can take breaks along your walk so you don't sweat, you build up sweat, just rest for a second, or try the replace your socks trick. You're stinking up the place for a few seconds, but if you're going to be there all day, and sometimes you need to sit all day, there's those days where you're like, God, I'm so cold, I want to go inside, but God, I'm in the right spot, and if I leave, I'm potentially blowing a chance. Switch out the sock trick.
Yeah. One thing I started doing, speaking of sweaty feet, is I've actually started using the dead downwind boot powder to help absorb some of the moisture.
I put that in my boots every time.
Yep. And it seems to be working. So I'm digging on that to help with the sweat, because I do get sweaty feet walking in. That's the one thing that always kills me, is my feet are the first thing that gets cold, and then I'm usually miserable from about 9 o'clock in the morning till dark, which makes it for a tough
man,
hunt.
There's nothing worse, man. Because once your feet get cold, it just seems like it just works its way up, and then it's your core.
Yep.
We talked about our sleeves.
Yep.
The other day it was 34 degrees or something in the stand, and all I had on was the Fanatic hoodie. And then I had a Stratus vest.
Right.
And my arms were chilly, but it was never uncomfortable, at all. But man, if my core gets cold, my feet get cold, that makes for a miserable sit.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You're pretty much out of gas at that point. But,
yep.
So we'll answer, let's do one more. Because there's a couple more here, and then we might have to do a second Q&A session at some point to cover.
Or we can speed answer them.
We could speed answer them. So we'll do this one. And
let's try it. Let's try it.
So this one is from Michael Piccoletti. Hopefully I said your name right. He's asking, how do I handle all day sits in a saddle or in a stand? And so I guess you had to go first.
You do saddle, I'll do stand.
Yeah. So saddle, going to be completely transparent here. I'm new to saddle hunting. I have done an all day sit in the saddle. And for me, whether, all day sit, regardless of what you're using, for me, it's like 80% mental. It's going to be long. It's going to be slightly uncomfortable, within reason. And you just kind of have to mentally prepare yourself to know that it is what it is. You know what I mean? I try to take things along, to occupy myself to a degree. It's like, I'll take a book along, to read intermittently during the day, during the slow periods. I'll be the first to admit that I'm not afraid to take like a little 5-minute like power nap, if I can pull it off, whether it's in a saddle or a stand, just to, because it is what it is. You're up crazy early and it gets a little slow, and that sun hits you after you've been sitting there for a few hours. If you need to take a little snooze, just make sure you wear your damn safety harness, or in the saddle, you're already kind of tethered in. But the one thing, with the saddle that is a little bit different, I guess, is that, there is some physical demands of it just by the nature of how it works, and demanding on your core and your core strength and stuff like that. So, people talk about getting into saddle shape and stuff like that. And I guess I agree with that to a certain degree. I definitely wouldn't take a saddle on a hunting trip and decide that that's the only thing I'm going to use and try to do 10 all day sits in a row in it if you've never sat in it before. But I will say, for me, the first all day sit didn't really bother me. I think in part it's like I'm pretty active in general, and I try to get up every morning and get a workout in and stuff like that. So it didn't bother me as much. So the one thing I would say is like, if you're planning on doing all day sits in a saddle or in a tree stand, whatever, it's like I have kind of like my archery season has hit workout plan to a degree where it's like I'm less focusing on like the normal stuff I do the rest of the time of the year. And now I'm really kind of looking at like, what are the muscle groups I'm going to use whenever I'm hunting. Right. And so for me, it's like, I'll start doing more core exercises. I'll start doing, Superman's like, Superman poses and stuff like that to try to help build your back muscles. Cause most of the time you get uncomfortable because of, lack of strength in your core. The other thing I'll do too, and this might sound all new age and hippy dippy, but I'll actually start doing a lot more yoga as hunting season starts to approach, just so I stay flexible and kind of stay limber and, and my muscles aren't all tense and tight and stuff like that. So those are the kind of the ways that I prepare to do all day sits. Because there's no way around it. It's a grinder. The saddle, if you're not kind of prepared, familiar and used to it, can be even more so a grinder. But those are the ways I kind of get ready. So I don't know, John, how you approach yours.
So I've never hunted out of a saddle. So for tree stand hunting, for me, I've got naturally not the greatest back in the world. Just not blessed with a good back. So I'll hit the chiropractor as soon as the season's over. It usually takes me a couple of visits at the chiropractor to get straightened out. But the two biggest things that help me for all day sits is I alternate between sitting and standing. Generally, I will stand longer than I sit. Usually, if it's a morning hunt, I'll sit through the darkness, right? And then when it's starting to get light, that's when I'll stand, and I'll be standing for a while. Then maybe sit for a little bit. When you think things are starting to die down, do some sitting. the convenient smartphones.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a dirt track racing game on my smartphone. I race dirt late models without the volume. And here's the thing. People are like, oh my God, I can't believe you sit up there and you're playing video games on your phone and stuff like that. I can't even tell you how many times I've glanced up from my phone and I've seen deer walking in.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm sitting there playing a game, I'm not moving.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like my thumb is moving on the screen and they can't see my thumb. When you're standing, you're situating, you're sitting down, you're standing, you're shifting your hips, you're moving from side to side, you're you know what I mean? Like that's just more movement, right? So, you know, I'm guilty of it, man. Instagram, Facebook, play a couple of video games to pass some time here and there. I'm also looking at maps, and reading topography, seeing where I might want to see if I spot something new. I'm looking at weather. I'm always looking at tomorrow's hunt, looking at the barometer and wind change, or when's the next going to be the next big wind shift. And that's what I do to pass the time. If I have a camera guy, you know, a little bit of light conversation, you know, goes a long way.
Yeah.
But they can be grinders, man.
Yeah.
Just find something to do to kind of occupy your time.
Yeah. So I think the moral of the story here is, you know, try to make sure you're feeling good before you do it, before the all day sits come along physically, right? And then find some things to help you pass the time. And then otherwise just mentally get ready for the meat grinder, because that's what it's going to be for a handful of days. Because I'm kind of in that space right now. So this is a really good question, because getting ready to do the Ohio trip, you know, and and out to my dad's, you know, be hunting, doing all that. And those are going to be all, you know, once this time of year hits, like this weekend, you know, like the 26th ish, it's like from that point forward, like all my sits are all day, you know, it's unless there's like a reason I need to come out of the woods for like a family obligation or something like that. But otherwise it's like, I go in at dark, I come out at dark, and that's kind of how it works. So I'm in that mental preparation phase right now where I'm like, all right, I'm going to have like 2 weeks of brutality. But if it works out and I get to put a hammer on the ground, it's a lifetime of memories. So it's worth it.
Yeah, that's right. It's all worth it.
Yeah. All right. So the next one here, we'll try to do speed ones of these. This is my buddy Tom Titlow here. He says, when will we drink beers over dead deers? So I'll go ahead and answer this one. Tom, hopefully soon. So there you go. I'll call you when it happens. You can help me drag.
Yeah, I like Tom, man. He's a good dude. Yeah. Next time I'll probably see him will probably be ATA. Yeah. So, buy me a beer.
Yeah,
Tom.
Exactly. We'll all hook up there and we'll go out and have beers on Tom. Sounds good. Tom, I just put you in on
I like it.
I just slotted you in for the bill for our outing. You're welcome.
Yep.
The next one is he says he has the string on his bow is fraying. So this is more of a technical question. When should I replace it, and is it safe to use? So I'll go ahead and let you take a stab at this one first.
In my opinion, if the bow string is more than 2 years old, just go ahead and replace it. If it's not more than 2 years old, because let's face it, man, bowstring, it's not cheap, but it's cheaper than broken limbs, and wrecking your season. You know what I mean? Chances are with a new bowstring, you're going to have to sight in and stuff like that. A lot of times if it hasn't busted and you go ahead and change it out, they can take measurements and get you pretty darn dialed in to where you might just have to make a few adjustments here and there. But, man, bow wax is your friend. I'm pretty critical about that. I always try to re-wax my stuff, definitely before the start of the season. And, you know, some of those public land sits, man, I'm dragging my stuff around and trying to check my bowstring. But a little bit of fraying, I mean, that's natural. That happens. Yeah. That's not a huge thing. But, that's the bowstring explosion can be really, really dangerous. Yeah. And you can hurt yourself. You can hurt your limbs. You can hurt your cams. When in doubt, just replace it.
Yeah, 100% agree. You know, I think I think some of it is too, is like you have to take, like, I think like you said, take into consideration the age of the string itself. Like how old is it? If it's a year old and you're just getting, and you shoot a lot, it's like maybe you're okay. But if you're that worried, if you're concerned about it, then just change it out. I think also some things that come into play too is like, where do you hunt? Because I know my bowstring last year was fine while I was here. I went to Montana, about a week into Montana, to that dry air, dried the string out, and all of a sudden it was starting to fray. You know what I mean? So, So, and that was just because of the conditions that I was hunting in. I'm the same way as you, where it's like I'm pretty liberal with the bow wax. It's like I try to wax the string anytime I think about it, and I always try to make sure that it has just a little bit of tack to the string, and then I know that it's in good shape. But yeah, if you're in doubt, to your point, it's like, don't take any chances. If you think it's something that needs to be replaced, just go ahead and replace it. It's better to be safe than sorry on many levels. So that, I think, I would give the same advice.
Real fast, funny story. So one of my really good friends back home in Kentucky, Mike Riddle, he was a co-owner of a bow shop, and I remember a guy coming in there one night to the bow shop, and he's like, you guys got string for such and such bow? And he's like, yeah, I've got one. And he's like, all right, well, the bow's only a year old. And Mike's like, well, all right, are you sure you need to replace it? And the guy pulls his bow out of the case, and it looked like Boyd Tinsley's violin bow after, a 3-hour session at Giant Stadium, with Dave Matthews or something. There's like hairs hanging down off of it. I'm like, yeah, it's time to replace that.
Hey, does this look normal to you guys? Is this?
Yeah. I'm like, yeah, you might want to replace that, because he referred to it as fraying. I'm like, dude, that's wrecked,
That's awesome.
And if nobody knows who Boyd Tinsley is, violin player, former violin player for Dave Matthews, then sorry, but
that's the second
for
time.
For those that do, we'll get a mental image and
right,
they'll know what I'm talking about.
That's the second time we've actually brought up the violin player from Dave Matthews on this show.
I know. Yeah. Crazy, man.
All right, so this is the last one. Okay. So this one says, and this is from J. Rayner Hart. Hopefully I said that right. It says, having only a week to hunt a property that you travel to, how aggressive should you or would you play the wind? So I guess I'll start with this one. Okay. So this is me, and this is my personal preference. I pay attention to the wind. Well, let me back up. Let me start by this. I think part of how aggressive you're going to be is based on how much time you have to hunt. If you are traveling to this place and you have the luxury to have plenty of time off, and you're going to be able to hunt them on the best weather days and kind of pick and choose your days and stuff like that. And, it also, I would take into consideration, what do you know about the critters you're chasing on that piece of property? Do you have some that you have historical information on, that you have a pretty good idea or pattern as to what they do? Or is it the opposite, that you don't really know much about the critters on there, and maybe it's the first year you've hunted? I think all these things kind of play into how aggressive you should be. For me, and I'll just give my scenario, because I'm getting ready to do this. I'm going to Ohio to hunt public land. I've scouted it. This will be the second year that I've hunted this particular area in general, not necessarily the same spot per se, but like the general, 60-ish thousand acres that are there. Have some familiarity, have some cameras out, but don't know a ton about the deer there, because it's, I don't have historical information on any of them necessarily. And I'm going to be there for about 8 days, right? So if I plan to be successful, I can't, really pussyfoot around. So the way I kind of approach things is, my saying this year has been, willing to risk it for the biscuit, so to speak. So I will hunt the wind aggressively. I think in general, if you want to try to get on good deer, I think you have to hunt the almost wrong wind, or just off winds, and let the deer think that they have the wind. Which doesn't mean you walk through a known bedding area and blow it out, or through a food source and blow it out early in the morning, or whatever the case is, or in the evening when you're getting out of your stand. Like, you still want to be careful about those things. But when you're setting up and the wind is maybe just not quite 100% right, I'll still hunt it. A lot of people would kind of turn their nose up at that, and they've probably had more success than me. But at the same time, I only have a certain amount of time to hunt. I'm a normal working dude. So it's like when I have time to go hunt, I can't sit back and not hunt because the wind isn't right for me or isn't perfect. Now, I won't hunt the wrong winds in my best spots. It's like I'll hunt, other areas that, maybe aren't as good on those winds where I'm like not quite as worried about it. But even those good spots, I'm still going to not necessarily wait for the perfect wind. I'm going to wait for a wind that'll work instead of a perfect wind. And that's kind of how I approach it. Cause a lot of it's just based on how much time I have and I can't waste days not getting after it. So that's my approach, John. I don't know how about you, man?
So, we talked about it earlier about sticking to the plan, sticking to the tactics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you can stick to your tactics all the way to the end and you didn't accomplish your goal. And, you might kick yourself for it. I do think that play the wind. It's very easy to do to get down to those last couple of days and go into panic mode.
Mm-hmm.
And, the fifth day or the sixth day might be the day that it all came together for you if you stuck to your plan. So if you've got a sound plan in place and your gut's telling you that's what you should do, then I say stick to it. It is very hard advice to give to somebody that says, hey, man, all I have is these 6 or 7 days to make it happen. If it doesn't happen, I'm going buckless this year. And I don't want anybody to do that. So it's very, very tough. If you only have one piece of property and you've only got 6 or 7 days, man, I almost hate giving advice for that. You know what I mean?
It's tough. It's tough,
because you don't want to mess up somebody's hunt. And but I've been known to be a person that can sometimes get a little aggressive and play some marginal wins. So for me, getting aggressive is slicing the pie and getting on that ragged edge of potentially being busted.
Yep.
And hope that your scent control game is on point. But that's how I would get aggressive. Just don't go into the hunt balls to the wall, thinking, man, I only got 6 or 7 days, because all it takes is 5 seconds, as we all know.
Yep. Yeah. I'm definitely a little less aggressive early on, and and when I say conservative, like my conservative approach to hunting the wind is probably more aggressive than most people's aggressive approach. Quite honestly, you know what I mean? Because I just I don't know why. It's just I've always that's the way I've always kind of been. It's like I've always kind of had if this spot doesn't work out and it gets blown out and I get busted and it's busted up or whatever, then so be it. I'll go find the next spot. Is kind of my approach. And there's some guys that I've listened to and heard some really good information from that take somewhat similar approaches. They don't hunt bad winds necessarily, and I'm not suggesting anyone hunt just a god awful wrong wind in a good spot. But like a good example would be like a dude like Cody DeQuisto, right? Like that guy gets after it. He's going after a specific deer, and he is not afraid to bump a deer. He's going to get right up in its business. He's going to hunt aggressive winds, and if that deer blows out and is gone, he's moving on to finding the next deer, and getting after the next one. But you also have to have
he's got lots of tracts of land to do that on.
He does have a lot of tracts of land to do it on, and he's also has a track record of finding the next deer. You know what I mean? Which,
correct.
So you have to have the confidence that it's like you're going to be able to move the next piece of ground, and it might be public because maybe you don't have a bunch of tracts of land. You know what I mean? And you have to go in and you have to reassess and figure out and get on another good deer and put a plan together, and you got 3 days to do it. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
It's hard to give advice in that situation because you don't know what everyone's comfortable with and willing to give up necessarily. But that's kind of how I approach it. I approach it a little bit more aggressively. And sometimes I eat the bear, sometimes the bear eats me. So, but I'm willing to live with it.
Sometimes you're the bug, sometimes you're the windshield.
Yeah, exactly. That's a pretty good one. I like that one. I don't know that I've ever heard that one before.
Yeah, but it's, and like you said, I mean, when I first started hunting, I was not aggressive. And then I went through a phase where I was pretty aggressive. And then I've kind of gone back to being not aggressive. And I mentioned it earlier this year in a podcast that this year I was going to be a little bit more aggressive. And by my definition of aggressive, it's, not get hung up on one spot. If it's just not panning out, but it's an easy set to get to, don't, always be willing to keep pushing. And it's like a motto for life,
Right.
You don't ever want to look back at the season and say, well, man, I didn't do everything I could have done, so maybe this guy, maybe the last couple of days, maybe throw a couple of Hail Marys.
Yep. Yep.
And at least you can say you tried everything. I don't think then you feel you can't lose.
Yeah.
You can't lose with that strategy.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, those are all the questions, man. So I think if we don't have anything else to add, I think this episode is a wrap. Sound good?
Sweet.
Awesome, man. Well, hey,
sounds
dude,
like a plan, dude.
good luck as the weather turns, brother. And I'm sure we'll be texting. We'll be connected here while
keep me in the loop. Let me know what's shaking. I'll be I'm sure we'll have a lot of texting going back and forth when you're transitioning from PA to Ohio, and I'll be holding it down here in Iowa, kind of bouncing around a couple different properties, a little bit of public, and getting ready to get in that swing where it's going to be hunting hard.
Yep.
Things should start happening here pretty soon.
prime time is here, man. Let's do it. All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. We'd, of course, like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We'd be super appreciative of that. And that will also ensure that you get the daily podcast that will be coming during the course of rut camp and my hunt in Ohio. And before we shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners that continue to help us make this podcast possible. Wicked Tree Gear, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Trophy Ridge, Ozonics, Obsession Bows, Tecumani Seed, Glacier Coolers, Ramcat Broadheads, Trophy Taker Rests, and Dead Downwind. And until next time, we'll see y'all.
On my heels, makes me proud, makes me steal. I could show you through the door. I ain't welcome anymore. And long time coming, if it all, it takes a special knowing to color for damaged heads, broken letters, rationalize yourself in numbers, but I